What's the most NSFW reason you've seen someone get fired? Guy wanted to leave early. Boss said no. So he put a melted chocolate bar down his pant leg saying he crap himself and had to go home. Went on vacation and returned. Got called to HR. Apparently someone had been stealing from vending machines, so they installed security cameras. They watched a video of him buying a chocolate bar, heating it up in a microwave, and putting it down his pant leg. Story 2, FedEx Hub, Memphis. 2 aircraft mechanics got caught having sex in an aircraft cockpit. Both fired. One of them successfully appealed her termination on the grounds that she was on break at the time. Story 3, Buddy got fired because he was getting head in the cooler from the girl he'd been interested in for months. It was the first time they ever did anything, and he barely got the tip in before getting caught. Story 4, he told a pregnant girl, "If your boyfriend end inside you before you give birth, it will help the baby slide out better." Corporate could no longer hide his drinking at work after that. Story 5, devout religious guy who never ever drank decided to take up drinking all of a sudden while on business travel. He then decided that people wanted to see his junk. Turns out they didn't. Story 6, guy was on a work trip in South Korea and put a trip to a happy massage parlor on the company credit card. He didn't think they would translate the receipt he turned in. Story 7, co-worker of 5 years was caught inside our work boots at a construction site. End of day, the worker would go into the change room and sniff and wear our boots, and sometimes end inside them. A co-worker saw a stain inside his soles that wasn't there night before, so set a camera up and caught them. Pleasure themselves and end inside the boots. Employer got us all brand new boots. I also have a hunch that when we toss out our boots, the ex-coworker takes them home and does stuff to it I can't imagine. Worker has been fired and reported. Story 8. I have lots of dumb traditional stories, but the one that hits me was when I was a teenager working at Pizza Hut. We had this kid working with us who was 18 years old and a full-on addict. He showed up on time, did the job, but would take a bathroom break a day that was pretty long, that he was always pretty sweaty and irritable before he took it. Then he'd be slow and goofy after. We knew. Just like how we knew the 2 guys who cleaned the parking lot 3 times a day were smoking bowls behind the dumpster. Whatever, as long as you get the job done and don't disappear. Then one day, this dude goes for his shooting up break and doesn't come back out after 15 minutes. We knock on the door for a couple minutes, no answer. We shout, ask if he is okay, no answer. We assume he would, so we pick the lock on the door, literally just one of those ones where you use a screwdriver to unlock it from the outside. The door opens and the dude has a needle in one arm. Yeah, he was fired. Story 9. Worked in a call center where a few dudes put a Carolina Reaper sucker in the microwave. It happened before I got there that day, but that half of the building was evacuated and people said it was burning their eyes. Dude was fired that day. Story 10. How about should have been fired but didn't? Because we're having a hard time finding anyone to work here. Anyway, so I worked at a company that built delivery vehicles onto purchased chassis. We typically had acres of finished trucks waiting to get shipped out in our yard. One fine day, an employee saw a couple of other employees slip into the back of a truck. A few minutes later, a couple more employees came by and got into the back of the same truck. He just minds his own business until a supervisor asks him if he knows where one of these people is. So he tells the supervisor what he saw. The supervisor goes out to the truck and just rolls up the rear door, revealing 2 naked men and 2 naked women just going at it on a couple of moving blankets. So evidently, they'd regularly been sneaking out for a couple of hours, a couple times a week for these. Story 11. Dude was working 3 jobs and would always fall asleep once he got to our office. On more than one occasion, he, I assume, had hot dreams and ended up making a lot of inappropriate noises and having wet dreams all over himself. My boss tried to be understanding, but he reached a limit. Story 12. In a team meeting, person was walking around handing out a form to people and forgot to give one to someone. Guy who didn't get the form said, "What am I? AN?" It was shocking because this was a major financial services firm. 25 plus years later, I'm still stunned. Story 13. The only time I had to demand an employee's security card and laptop and then personally escort them out of the office was when it was discovered that he had a side hustle as an 18-plus worker and got caught on camera servicing a client in the office after hours. Yeah, he was also an idiot. Story 14. Having sex in a work van with unobstructed windows parked at the car rider pickup area of a school at pickup time. And yes, a parent turned them in. Not sure if they came or not. Story 15. A guy at our work got fired for having terabytes of adult film on work devices and watching it in the office. One might assume he was doing it in an office with a door he could close, but nope, low-walled cubicle layout. Baffling. Story 16. Not me, but a guy I used to work with. He was working at a golf course, and a new girl just started. One of the other guys there immediately developed a crush on her. He was trying to figure out how to start a conversation with her before one day. He saw her get in her car. There was a 9-inch nails sticker on the back. Perfect. They like the same band. So, did he ask her what her favorite song was? No. Did he ask about her taste in music in general? Also, no. This guy just left a note on her car with some 9-inch nails lyrics. Specifically, one of the lines from their song, Closer. For those of you who know the song, it's the line you're thinking of. Those of you who don't, this guy's opener to some girl he had barely spoken to was the part of the song that says, "I want to duck you." Shockingly, she did not appreciate this, and he didn't work there much longer. Story 17. The guy had just started, worked for less than a month, and was fired BC. He was pleasure himself in the bathroom during breaks. His mom was the department manager of the garden center at the time too. Story 18. Coworker of a few years got fired after he told a female employee on her first day, "Eventually I duck every girl that works here, so we might as well get it over with. You want to go out for a drink tonight?" She was married and not at all amused. Story 19. Publicly held investment fund. Complex general counsel and chief investment officer were having a sexual relationship. He was married, she was not. That wasn't the problem. The problem was they were having sex in the office. And after being warned because there was an HR department and coworkers complained, they kept doing it. So they both got canned from 7-figure jobs. Story 20. Big virtual meeting with 3 teams. Guy posted a hot link into the chat. What made it even better was no one caught it at first. They couldn't edit the text because of the software we used. So the meeting host had us all leave and rejoin a fresh meeting session under technical difficulties. Lesson learned. Make sure you know what is in your Control-C buffer. Story 21. A night cashier at the service station I managed pulled out his junk and started counting out change with it in front of a female customer. When she called to complain, I had to look at the security video. And sure enough, he used his little junk to count out this lady's chain. I will never get that image out of my mind. Story 22. Maybe too literal, but he went under yellow caution tape in an active hot work area, welding, got told by the plant manager to not do that again without proper authorization and safety gear, then verbally mocked the plant manager and went under the caution tape and back several times in a row. OSHA version of NSFW, but damn, don't mess with the plant manager when it comes to safety violations. Story 23. At my wife's work, someone got canned for getting caught pleasure himself after work in his car in the parking lot, right outside the C-suite windows. The really crazy part was that he asked if he could keep his job. Story 24. I'm a teacher, so it wasn't really NSFW, but the administration spun to be such with the vague morality clause. Total bullcrap. A teacher was a fitness enthusiast. She did CrossFit and ran marathons. They discovered that she taught fitness pole dancing on Saturdays at a CrossFit gym. They fired her for it. Story 25. Got high on lunch and drove the wrong way down a one-way street. When the cops pulled him over, there was so much smoke coming out of the car, it looked like it was on fire. Story 26. Manager took pictures of female workers who weren't doing their jobs. Basically taking a break, he blackmailed them into getting their numbers and apparently to have sex with them. He was terminated immediately after HR found out. OFC, this was at Amazon. Story 27. I had a coworker when I worked at major grocery chain. That was one of the best coworkers ever. Hardworking, always friendly, always helpful. Had a solution to any problem that could come up. He was without a doubt the hardest working person in that entire store. We soon found out the reason he was. That way was due to him snorting cock off the bathroom counters whenever he took a bathroom break. Our manager went into the bathroom and noticed a bit of white powder, called the cops. Substances tested everybody, and then fired him when he tested positive. He didn't act like an addict at all. He was just a very nice and hardworking person, and we never would have known if it hadn't been for that substances test. Story 28. It was a combination of 2 things. 1, he had a disease that causes him to have bumps all over his body, and he had a very disgusting habit of showing them to coworkers. I had to talk to him about it a couple of times, because he'd lift up his shirt to do so. Once, he bumped into the counter, and one burst, causing it to bleed all over. He lifted his bloody shirt to show anyone who came by, coworkers and customers alike. He refused to leave home to change, and the shift lead on duty didn't call me so that I could instruct him to leave. Second, same guy had a habit of reprinting NSFW pictures of people who were having them developed at our store. When we caught him, it was because a coworker, whose relative printed NSFW pictures only when she was working, noticed that an order she had already printed was reprinted. She noticed the time and compared it to the schedule, and there was only one person who could have printed them. She reported it to me. I checked the camera and saw him looking at them on the computer while he was fondling himself. Then he reprinted them, put them in an envelope, and put them in his work locker. When we searched his locker, there were about 8 sets of photos that he reprinted of customers. Dude was a sicko in many ways. Story 29. There was a private bathroom in the first aid room. No one was supposed to use it, but we all did anyway because it was close and private. A woman walked in there to use it and caught a supervisor with his junk inside the cleaning woman's mouth. What baffled me is that it wasn't even the first time he got caught, like they actually gave him a slap on the wrist the first 3 times. If it were a regular employee, they would have been escorted out immediately upon the first offense. Story 30. I'm 75 meters. The only one I can think of happened at the last company I worked for before retiring. One of our Jeets, a mechanical engineer, a young one who'd only been with us for less than a year, and he'd gone to work for us right after graduating college, got extra stupid, took a picture of his junk, and sent it to the phone of one of our female employees. Yeah, company cell phones on our internal network. When she took her phone to her supervisor, a call to our IT department pinpointed our get quickly. I was his department head. I could not believe someone bright enough to get an engineering degree from the University of Minnesota could be that friggin' stupid. I would have fired him on the spot. But of course, HR has to do their thing to make sure we didn't violate his rights. Then we fired him. I don't know all the rules of such things. My inclination is just to get rid of such people. But I guess it involves a lot of paperwork, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. But we had our IT department look into things, and Dummy had been sending pics of himself over our network to others, I don't know whom. And that boosted the offense to a point where we didn't have to do the counseling thing, second chance, and the other stuff. Story 31. My ex-state manager got caught ducking one of my staff at the work Christmas party. 2 of us walked in on him in the toilets. He was 55 and married. To be honest, it wasn't so much the fact they were ducking. Even though it's seedy, she knew what she was doing. Story 32. I've had several coworkers get fired for watching adult film. One guy complained his computer was slow, called it to check his computer out. Turned out he had about 30 tabs running in the background. Another guy on third shift was watching hot films constantly on his phone. The funny thing was, this guy was rehired at the company after he was fired years prior for watching adult film at work. I think the one that takes the cake is a guy I worked with for years. He was nice, but very odd. Like played Magic the Gathering, deigned, and also went to Magic World events, similar to the ones in the movie role models. He was a leader of a Boy Scouts troop. It was the middle of the day. All of the sudden, Homeland Security, FBI, and the local police department showed up. They arrested him, took all of his stuff. He was a machinist, and most of them had their own toolboxes, and didn't say much to anyone else. Turns out this giant piece of crap was selling pictures CP. Pretty gross human. Story 33. Over a decade ago, I was a server at a suburban tavern. One late night after my shift, I was walking out to my car and someone flashed their headlights at me. It was the dishwasher, sitting in the driver's seat, waving me over through his open window. Hey, my car won't start. Can I borrow your phone? Walked over to his car, went to slip my phone through his open window, and he grabbed my wrist with one hand and pulled me towards him hard. His other hand was on his junk that he had pulled out of his pants. I didn't even notice it before with how dark it was. I twisted and getted my arm away from him, somehow while not losing my phone in the chaos. I ran back into the building and told my managers about it. They reviewed the security camera footage and confirmed my story and terminated him on the spot. They didn't even seem apologetic to me or empathetic to my situation. The gits just acted annoyed that they had to hire a new dishwasher and blamed me for leading him on. I barely even talked to the guy, much less flirted with him. LMAO. Story 34. I work in the military. Had a civilian intern, woman married to another military member, ducking one of our new officers at the workplace. Her husband found the texts and sent them to our command. She was fired. They made an announcement that her position was no longer funded, and the officer got to go to a new base with no negative actions taken. Story 35. Used to do pizza deliveries in university. Since we did a lot of on-campus deliveries, we would get the very occasional sleazy delivery, aka the whole "I don't have any money, can I pay another way" type of deal. Turns out our location had this happen more than I thought, so my boss had an official policy on it. We were allowed to accept these offers, so long as the customer paid, and any lost time from activities would be counted as the employee's break. Word of this policy got out, and students would end up ordering and asking for specific delivery drivers. Never me, though. It got to the point where there was an unofficial code when ordering, where if someone ordered a pizza and asked for extra olive oil, it meant they wanted sex. We didn't have olive oil as a topping. Eventually, word spread a little too far and attracted law enforcement. My boss wound up arrested for running an escort ring, and his replacement was hardline, "No sex on the job." And that's the story of the short-lived pizza delivery escort ring. I should add that it was a universal understanding among everyone that knew the policy that you had to pay for the pizza. No one who ordered expected to not pay, and they'd usually pay in advance anyways. Story 36. Could it be the convenience store manager? Female, having a three-way with 2 cashiers, male and female, after hours in the store. The manager promised raises and promotions and didn't actually give either. So HR was called, or convenience store manager. Different location, male. Strip searching all ages of female applicants to make sure they don't show evidence of substances used. He was fired, arrested, tried, and convicted. Story 37, extremely short-lived front-of-house manager at my work was caught passed out in his car with a pipe in his hand. But he wasn't fired until he was caught in the shared manager's office at a university behind one-way glass with his pipe in hand. He was later arrested for hitting a customer after getting a job at Denny's. Story 38. I was working as an HR assistant to our generalist for a small resort located in Oregon. I was doing some daily rounds on a very slow and off-season morning. Not very many guests, not a ton happening. I am making my way through the kitchen to meet with our kitchen manager about inventory and hear some sounds from two people. I looked around to find the sound and I see that our walk-in fridge is ajar and the sound's coming from there. So I go and open the door and there is my kitchen head chef having sex with our new waitress that was hired maybe 2 weeks before. I said something like, "Oh," or a loud gasp. But then the manager came in from the back loading bay door and saw me, and then them too. So they were caught. I had to go report it to my boss, and they checked cameras. To see them both go inside the fridge and the two employees didn't deny anything. Found out they had done it a few other times too. Yes, I and my team had to fire both, and it was not a pleasant experience. The cook was married, and the wife found out when he got fired. I left myself pretty soon after this event. So this is the only update I have. I just don't understand why they had to do it at work on clock and in the walk-in. We lost all the product in that walk-in. You'd use them to eat food from a kitchen you know had been in a fridge with people having sex over it? Probably not. Story 39. Didn't happen at my workplace, but at my sister's. One guy at her company masturbated to adult film in his underwear while high in the office during after-work hours. Eventually, he needed to go to the bathroom, which is outside of the office, and you need a key card to get back in. Well, he only was wearing underpants and forgot his key card, so he was locked out. Eventually, the police picked him up while he tried to walk home in his underpants. It is without question that he was fired without any further notice. Story 40. I worked for one company and their background checks I guess weren't great. They hired one guy who was hugely awkward and made some staff uncomfortable, but he usually kept his down and did his work. Then, one day, guy disappeared without a trace, and Hare refused to acknowledge the guy existed. I learned later on that he was a registered offender and was caught distributing cup years ago. He actually was not allowed to use a non-monitored electronic device and had been using our computers for months to do his job. Only reason he was caught was because his caseworker finally caught on to what the guy was doing, as he wasn't allowed to work unless he was being physically monitored, babysat by a social worker. What's crazy is it happened twice. Had another guy get hired, onboarded, and worked for 2 weeks before his caseworker came in and was like, "He can't be working here," and was given the boot. Story 41. Got offered a job by a chef I had worked for in the past at an upscale restaurant. When I asked how he got the job, he told me the previous chef had to use his phone to play music throughout the restaurant, and apparently he had taken a break and went to the bathroom. This dude supposedly blasted adult film over the speakers to the entire restaurant. It didn't last long as the guy realized immediately what was going on, but was fired when he stepped out. Story 42. I was 17 and working in a supermarket. One day, this new kid gets hired. He kept coming up to me and grabbing me all over. When I told him to stop, he kept acting like I was joking. "You love it, really." Then he'd grab me again. Turns out, he didn't treat the women in the workplace any better, and he ended up getting fired for it. That lasted less than a week because apparently in their rush to dismiss him, management hadn't done it properly and were forced to rehire him. He kept coming back and assaulting me to the point I knew I was going to break his nose if he didn't stop. So I, a 17-year-old kid, took the decision to tell my manager. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever made, but I realized the alternative would be getting arrested for beating the crap out of him. I was dreading the meeting with my manager the day I went in. The idea of telling someone that another man, no, a smaller, younger boy, was harassing me was anxiety-inducing. I got lucky. The day I was going to talk to my manager, he decided to operate a forklift without a license and destroyed a bunch of stock. He was fired immediately. I never had to face the shame of other people knowing I was a victim to this guy. Obviously, I'm older and more comfortable telling this story now, but it was a horrifying experience for me as a teenage boy. Story 43. I had a coworker who seemed like a nice guy at first upon interacting with him. Told me a coworker reported him after he called her beautiful. I didn't really have much interaction with him after that. Well, some time had passed, and other coworkers told me he got fired for harassment. They also told me he has history in and out of work of being overly aggressive with women to the point of trying to force himself on them. Story 44. At a call center, we had a weird, creepy guy who thought it was hilarious to rip farts all day long while taking calls. Like, would go out of his way to make them as loud and performative as possible. And because people were stuck to their desks with headsets, no one could really do anything about it. There was assigned seating, but it was pretty clear no one wanted to sit near this guy. So there was a sort of loose rule that anyone could go to an empty desk on shifts this guy was working. Brandon? I think it was Brandon, been a long time. Anyways, Brandon then made a point of waiting until this one girl found a desk and got on a call before taking the seat next to her, so he could intentionally keep farting at her. Not on at, like turning and aiming. And he'd follow her around, desk to desk, like this was his idea of flirting. And somehow it took about 50 different people logging HR complaints over multiple months before anything came of it. I had long since quit by that point, but I had friends there who kept me updated. By the end of it, it took nearly 6 months and 4 suspensions before they finally crap-canned him. Story 45. Well, one night, about 1 a.m., I was the administrator on duty. I got called by the nursing supervisor that we had an extremely irate wife of a patient demanding to speak with whoever was in charge in person. It took me about 30 minutes to arrive. The wife told me in no uncertain terms that she came to see her husband, the patient, walked into his room to find a nurse sitting on him in bed. They didn't notice her, and she observed the nurse do BJ her husband. Yeah, it left me no choice but to suspend the nurse and eventually terminate her. Story 46. Dude with Down syndrome had swiped the Eon picture off the wall and got caught pleasure himself to it in the corner of the break room. He was initially fired, but then got rehired because his caregiver rose a fuss about it, saying he didn't know any better. Say what you want about people with Down syndrome, but this dude knew exactly what he was doing. He told me he wanted to get caught, but not by the person who did catch him, but the girl whose picture he was pleasure himself to. I can't imagine what his plan was if she had. Shutter's story 47. Our 50-plus-year-old sales admin was fired for drinking what amounted to lean while at work. She came in one day completely out of it, slurring her words and speaking nonsense. Fell asleep at her desk, just staring at a blank screen. She was asked to go home and ended up crashing her car in the parking lot, running into the security gate. My boss gathered some of the guys in the conference room, and we watched the CCTV footage of it and had a laugh. It was funny at the time, but looking back now, I feel sorry for her. Didn't seem to get dealt a great hand in life. She also got caught vaping in the bathroom, which at a USDA facility is a big no-no. Story 48. Our HR is pretty much non-existent, so it's really hard to get fired for something NSFW, unless it's actively malicious or direct harassment. Like one guy who liked pulling pranks, and one of his pranks was going on to an 18-plus film website on another guy's work laptop when he was out for a little bit. Obviously, it was notified. They investigated the situation, and the prankster was fired. Thankfully, not the guy whose laptop was tampered with. Another instance was a guy went on a date with someone from a company we report to. The date wasn't the issue, although it can be murky territory. The issue was that he bluntly asked her to do BJ right after. Not exactly the most respectable thing to do, and not an impression you want to make to someone from a company that pays your own company. She mentioned it to her boss, who reported it to our HR, who fired him, and then we all had to take harassment training. Story 49. After a night out drinking with some coworkers, he went back to the office and took a dump on the floor in the lobby, which had security cameras. He claimed an attack of IBS or something, but that didn't save him. Story 50. A nurse at a rehab I worked at, where cell phones weren't allowed, snuck a cell phone in for one of the patients, and in exchange, he allowed her to have unprotected sex with him. She was aware that he was positive for herpes. Another patient caught on, and she told him that if he lets her do HJ off, she's going to give him a cell phone too. She was texting both of them dirty pictures and messages, and the one she was sleeping with, she was messaging him that she's going to move to his state to be with him and that she was so in love with him. They noticed that he was very tired in the mornings, and they checked the cameras to see if he was sneaking out. Instead, the cameras caught her coming into his room every night she was there. Story 51. Co-worker watching adult film at work, at a luxury hotel, in the business suite, on the guest computers, in front of guests. I was working the front desk and some dude came up to me as red in the face as it gets. I didn't want to confront him, so I just turned the Wi-Fi off for the entire hotel. I panicked. They didn't train me for this. Story 52. When the guy in charge of corporate IT security gets let out of the building in handcuffs, you can be damn sure dude had something unsavory discovered in his own files. Story 53. Former manager at Walmart. Many years ago, frozen and dairy truck showed up late. Unloaders walked into the freezer to see mid-40s woman going down on early 20s guy. Don't think she told her husband why she got fired. Her son eventually got fired too. He worked in a different department. Husband and son kept coming into the store and were complete gits took everything I had, to not say something along the lines of the overnight team Misses Your Wife Story 54. Employee wasn't fired, but was sent literally out to pasture. Female secretary sometimes notices her office suit jacket hanging on her chair is damp. Checks with facilities who confirms there's no leak. Back in the day, they ended up getting a trail cam from one of the Hunter coworkers. Caught a guy pissing on her jacket. Had been going on for months at this point because of contracts. Management can't seem to find a way to fire the pisser. They decide to try and make him quit. They put him in a cube in the hot-ass shop. They put him next to the paint shop with the fume. Finally, they dropped a mobile unit in the middle of Timbuktu on what used to be trailer skid parking. Dude had to commute 60 minutes each way to the middle of nowhere and had no one to piss on but himself. Story 55. Married car salesman working alongside a woman who does cold calls to bring in business. She would get a pay increase for every car sold for that month. So they worked together on every deal and would always go deliver cars together, no matter how close or far they were. And one day where we parked our personal cars, they were found ducking in one of the new cars. She was instantly fired, and right before the guy could be fired, he yelled at the owner a bunch and quit. I'm assuming so. It would appear that there was a falling out and can explain that to his wife without telling her he was ducking a coworker. Story 56. Male coworker got fired from the company for sexting a female colleague. She didn't participate in it or anything. He just messaged her out of the blue. IDK exactly what he said to her, but it was enough to make her uncomfortable and have her report. Dude initially requested to be transferred to a different work location within the same company. Request was granted, and I guess he felt like throwing a Hail Mary with sexting, thinking nothing bad would happen. Story 57. I'm a delivery truck driver. A company I worked for. The dispatcher was caught several times at his desk, rubbing one out. He was kind of a Danny Davito looking guy. When HR found out about it, the director had to go talk to him about it. From what we heard, she said, I'm just going to ask point blank, are you Pleasure himself at your desk? And he said, yes, I like it, and I'm going to keep doing it too. Fired then and there. People are crazy. I think he just really wanted to get fired. Story 58. Worked at a small telemarketing company. Typical semi-scammy stuff in the early 2000s. One of our best sales guys was an idiot and a total bro. Thought he was hot crap. Ended up showing his junk to a bunch of women on the floor, like they'd pass by his desk, and he's just whip it out like, ooh, look at that. Got fired. Story 59. HR chick was ducking the building handyman in her office after hours. Someone walked in while she was getting railed, bent over her desk. The office manager was crying, laughing as she told me. HR lady was someone who ducked over a lot of people and made no friends. Totally deserved it. Building guy kept his job. I wanted to high-five him. Story 60. Guy who worked in a doggy daycare, babysitting a room of 30 doggos alone. Guy not allowed to leave doggos alone or else will be fired. Mind you, both inside and outside of the daycare has public security cameras that dog owners have access to so they can watch their dog play if they want. Guy uses radio to ask for coverage, so he can go on a quick bathroom break, but the staff is too busy right before shift change. Guy waits nearly an hour and can no longer wait, so he drops his pants and poops in the trash can. Dog owner calls in to report he just witnessed a human crapting in a trash can live on CCTV. Guy wipes, then gets fired. Story 61. My company was bought out 13 years ago. Gave us fair warning about an impending substances test involving hair 6 months before the 17 people fired for a wide variety of substances. Story 62. He decided to bring a male blow-up doll to work and tie it to a pillar. When told to take it down or be fired, he refused to take it down and was very surprised and pissed to promptly be fired. Story 63. Assistant manager was ducking a part-time employee behind the counter after closing. They got caught because he started setting the alarm an hour after close, when he usually bragged about being out in 10 minutes or less. Loss prevention and the district manager waited 25 minutes until after close and caught them in the act. I had attended his wedding reception less than 6 months before. She was also married. Story 64. When working as a security manager for Securitas, was stationed at a HVAC warehouse. One of my security officers, in quotes because it was just a joke job, would regularly hook up with truck drivers in the parking lot. Client reported it multiple times. Took the CEO of the company to make a report before Securitas fired her. I, a measly $14 an hour manager, got to be the one to tell her she was fired for fraternizing with drivers on the clock. She promptly threw a handful of trailer locks at me, heavy gets, and trashed the security desk before storming off property. Good times. Story 65. Dealership tech here. Years ago, our loaner manager got caught ducking a sales lady and a loaner in the back parking lot. Was spoken to and given a warning. 2 months later, he's caught literally having sex in the upstairs supply storage area we used for winter tires, printer paper, and boxes. He was let go after that. Story 66. Night nurses and night security guards were using our department after the hospital closed as some sort of adult club. Did these idiots, some from security, not know there are cameras everywhere? Did these idiots not consider people would wonder why a bunch of nurses and a bunch of security all go missing at the same time? Did these idiots not think that having group sex during your workday was probably a no-no? Did these idiots not think about the consequences of losing livelihoods, licenses, reputations, marriages? Story 67. Sergeant for a police department was having an extramarital affair with a civilian in administration. The relationship had been going for a little while and only came to the attention of the command staff when the department's captain found very compromising footage on the officer's body cam. Evidently, the officer had kept the camera active on accident, and the captain found the video while looking for another incident. Troubling part was, the sergeant wasn't the only member of the department involved with that woman. Two other officers, one who regularly taught the yearly ethics course, and a member of the command staff were also involved with her. It was a mess. Story 68. Married GM was ducking a waitress on his office desk. His office was at the end of the line. Only two people had keys to the office, the GM and our district manager, who never really came around. Guess who came around that day? Caught with his pants around his ankles, bending her over the desk. Every line Cook saw. It was glorious. Steve, I'm still proud of you. Story 69. Someone watching adult film all day long on the computer of a pharmacy. How we spotted him. Some sites he visited generated a security alert. At this time, I worked in a cybersecurity firm that provided services to other business, and we all were very surprised when we understood what was happening. The funny thing is that the moment HR told him to come, he deleted history, thinking it would erase the proofs. It don't. I don't know how HR exactly fired him, but I think it was a combination of abuse of the pharmacy resources and not doing his job. Story 70. Lotus Notes admin had gigs of dirty films buried on servers both at HQ and in offices abroad. A different admin was arrested on site for essay of minors and his enormous stash of paraphernalia therein. He's a permanent guest of the Department of Correction. Story 71. The guy planted homemade bombs that destroyed a couple of power substations. When the feds raided his house, they found about 300 pounds of homemade explosives and a meth lab. Story 72. When Apple Cloud first came out, guy at work synced his home computer and work computer with his Apple Cloud account. So all of his files at work, including CUI, got synced to his home computer, and all of his dirty films at home got synced to his work computer. This was on a DoD network. The fallout was immense. Story 73. Doing body shots off another director on a work trip. He was quietly sent off to the airport early the next morning before the next round of meetings started. Story 74. Custodian lady was selling BJs in the conference rooms after hours to some contract workers on site. I guess one day the wrong person got invited and security camera footage shut that operation down real quick. Sad because she seemed like a nice lady with a husband and kids. Story 75. Got drunk at the company Christmas party, re-entered the building and took a crap on a subordinate woman's desk because she was married and wouldn't sleep with him. Of course, it was all on camera, and he was summarily fired the next morning. This caused them to disable everyone's access cards at the card readers on Christmas party night to prevent recurrences. He was way up the food chain, which I found hilarious. Story 76. My ex-husband got asked to leave after screwing most of the female staff at his new job. I was heavily pregnant at the time, and I only found out the truth because the one woman he didn't go after was a friend of my sister. Story 77. This was 22 years ago. I was 18, still in high school, working at the Cheap Seats Theater at the mall and concession. Ticket counter girl was found to be meeting men in between rushes and ducking them in the storage room. Story 78. Caught a guy pleasure himself in the disabled toilet once. He didn't lock the handle. He was friends with one of the managers, so they tried to give me a disciplinary for telling everyone. Story 79. When I was in school, a trainee ducked another teacher in the classroom. They locked the door, but it was an old door with one of those big keyhole and we could see them. He got fired, but she somehow was able to keep her job. Story 80. She technically wasn't fired, but resigned, but only because she knew they were already building a case against her. Sleeping with a prisoner, never actually caught in the act, but a lot on the G-Vine. Not long after he was released, she was openly in a relationship with him. Story 81. Foreign worker traveling for business was looking at adult films on company computer. Tried to play the foreigner card to it, but since it was also illegal in their country, it didn't work out. Well, what's the most NSFW thing you saw someone doing at work and still got away with it? Story 1. One male and one female coworker who had been a little flirty were mouthing off in a fun way at each other, and the man sternly walked over to the woman and slapped her hard across, then stepped away. He said, "I think I crossed a line there." And she said, "It's okay. I liked it." Story 2, walked into the break room one day to find one of our new cashiers getting fingered on the break room couch by one of our other new hires. I quietly walked out without making myself known. I think the only reason they never got fired is because nobody else saw it, and I did not want to have that convo with HR. But I did start taking my breaks in my car from that point on. Story 3. As a cook, I've seen a lot of people drinking on the job, usually while I was also drinking on the job. What I'm saying is I've been in a lot of safety meetings over the course of my career. Story 4. We had a serial crapter, someone crap in a urinal. Then there another instance where a turd was found in a stairwell. Eventually a guy, assuming the guy, was caught kicking a turd out of a pant leg while coming out of an elevator. That last one got him fired. Story 5. In my previous job in one of those top 4 firms, where the culture celebrates fools that come in before the boss and leave after the boss as a sign of hard work. Yet all he did was watch adult film and got promoted. Even nominated as a subject matter expert. Just don't ask me which subject. Also, then I realized these top 4 firms are full of crap. Story 6. My boss ducking a waitress in the manager's office. Employee doing sub-sentences on the job. Food hitting the floor with managers on the line with the cooks. Still sent out. Saw that happen way too many times. Someone pass in our bathroom at work. We didn't shut down for the night. All different spots. All of that happened. Lots more. Story 7. I didn't actually see it, but we had a guy at work who got caught with an escort in his truck at lunchtime. Twice. He did not get fired. Story 8. If you mean it literally. Then I watched a guy stuck on a 12-foot scissor lift freak out a bit and try and climb off it, and it tilted and started to fall. When a huge Tongan guy just reached up and one-handedly stopped it from falling, and then as the first guy fell off, he just grabbed him out of the air with his other hand. Story 9. Once, Spencer was looking at adult film. This was at a sales job. 4 other people at their desks. Small company, and I didn't get it. He was just scrolling through these pages of videos. Later, at a work meetup at the bar downstairs, he introduced us to his girlfriend. Said she was an adult actress. That might have had something to do with it. But he never explained at the time, and I didn't ask. Story 10. Worked at a grocery store. Homeless guy took a dump and proceeded to smear it all over the walls of the bathroom. Manager told me to clean it up. Quit and left. Story 11. I worked at a truck body shop, where the entire staff would gather in the paint shop to smoke substances. We'd drink all day while working and drive the forklift around the block to get more beer if we ran out. Assemble in the GM's office to snort. And the secretary had a habit of taking all her clothes off at random moments. No one ever got fired. Story 12. I worked at a dental office with a ridiculous break room. It was 3 chairs at a small counter and 2 lone chairs away from the counter for 5 of us. A coworker was dating a married man who would join for lunch about 3 times per week. He always had a chair, leaving one of us to stand while eating. It was BS that her married boyfriend, much older than all of us, got to eat lunch there because they couldn't be seen in public. Yes, the dentists knew he was married. No clue why this was allowed. Story 13. I was doing firearms training with a group of officers when a trainee, who never held a gun prior, got frustrated and confused with her weapon. Mag was in, and the chamber was primed, mind you, and she turns around, finger on the trigger, and starts flailing her gun all over, yelling some random crap I don't remember. We all got the duck down, but the craziest part is that she was only told to not do that again. Later on, we had a person playing around with an R-15 in one of the towers. They were playing with the charge handle, sliding it back over and over again. Apparently, the firing pin somehow struck one of the rounds, and it blew a hole in the tower roof. They got kicked from the tower, but stayed on shift. Last one, same place. We had 2 officers beefing. They said, "Catch me outside." One of the officers hit himself, but the other got in his car to chase him. They pulled over on the highway and drew guns on each other. Highway patrol had been coincidentally passing by at that time and ended up detaining both of the officers. Then, let them go at different times. They both showed up for work the next day and ended up simply getting put on different shifts because we absolutely could not afford to lose anyone else. I lied. Another. Maya Siyit and I were walking out of the compound after a shift and had just gotten to the last sally port, think a room between rooms, when a lieutenant, who I've never met, told us he wouldn't be unlocking the gate for us because they needed people for overtime. My sergeant goes up to the window and says, "If you make me come back inside unlawfully, I'm gonna beat the duck out of you." We went home. I ended up getting ducked for mandatory double duty because I stood with my Sudanese in solidarity. I was tired, already pulled a 16 that day on an overnight shift. Duck that butter bar piss boy. Story 14. 2 very stereotypical frat guy dude bro who used the slur bashed in the cooler at a steakhouse I worked at. One of them, do BJ the other guy. They freaked out and told everyone I was the gay one because I was the one who saw a dude do BJ another dude. Story 15. He didn't get away with it the time I saw it, but he must have done this many, many times because he did it without hesitation or skipping a beat. I worked at small movie theater 20-odd years ago and was refilling the hot dog rotator heater, and one of the slippery gits, they were frozen and the frost made them nearly impossible to keep a proper grip on, plus numb fingers when handling them. Shot to the floor and skidded across the tile, stopping only because an anti-slip mat was there. But my boss is rolling up and sees this and says, as he's picking it up, just staring into my soul, "Don't waste food!" And he puts it back on the rotator thing while staring at me angrily. As soon as that git walked away, I plucked it off and broke it in half. And into the trash it went. Saw him pick up cups and put them back in the cup slot that rolled on the gross, filthy floor, and made sure those went into the trash too. Dude was a menace. Pretty sure he dug popcorn bins out of the trash and put those back into circulation, but I never saw it and couldn't prove it. And before you ask why I didn't call the health department, I literally didn't know that was something I could do at the time. They sure as hell didn't have us do food safety training, and I didn't even know I was supposed to have it. I was hired and told what to do as the managers literally sat there and counted money. The next job I had in fast food, I learned a lot about it and was kind of pissed. I missed my chance to report that guy. Story 16. One night years ago when I was in the military, a girl do BJ one of my friends in the first floor lounge of the barracks. He and just as the roving watch walks around the floors to make sure nothing crazy is going on, walked in and flipped on the lights. The roving watch, after accidentally seeing my buddy end, basically said, "I saw nothing. Get out of here." I was second floor watch at the time. Second floor is where the females lived and every floor above was males. My job was to make sure no males entered through the door to the female living quarters. So I'm standing outside the female door on the second floor when Chowderface walks up the stairs and right past me as if nothing happened with semen all over her face. She goes through the doors, and shortly after, Roving Watch comes to tell me what she just saw. Later, my buddy just walked by with a smile. He was an angry dude like 99.99% of the time, who I was very good friends with, but you always got the impression he was one intrusive thought away from hit you. That was only time I think I ever saw him smile. Story 17. I worked for a latex mattress company as the company driver. They didn't need a full-time company driver, so I worked on the loading dock when I wasn't in the panel van. One of my fellow dock workers was a maniac, drove his forklift like the devil was after him, got sentenced to more than a year of weekly rage counseling because a couple cops did a stop and frisk on him, and he was carrying a couple doobies and went absolutely ape crap on them. He was known to go to a restaurant nearby the factory for his hour lunch and down 6 beers as often as he could afford it. Basically, your modern-day caveman maniac. There was a guard shack in the employee parking lot where the gate to the loading dock was, but it went mostly unused. One weekend, one of the owners of the company came by on a Sunday just to look around the factory. No one was working that Sunday, and the place was mostly buttoned up. Everything was hunky-dory until he saw someone in the guard shack. Upon investigation, this 70-year-old Ma, co-owner of the factory, discovered my coworker in the guard shack just absolutely railing an escort. It became a well-known company scandal, yet the coworker never seemed to suffer any kind of repercussions for it. I imagine they told him to stay the duck out of the guard shack and off company property when he wasn't working, but that's probably it. They knew he was a whack job, but he worked so furiously loading trucks that they valued him in a very weird and unhealthy sort of way. Story 18. When I worked at a hospital, I saw some crap, but just kept my head down. I came across a patient room converted to storage room, and someone had set up a few Bitcoin mining rigs in the back. Free electricity and cold temps constantly. Pretty ballsy, but I'm guessing whoever it was is a multimillionaire these days. There was also a registrar that I would notice jotting down the SSN and DOB info from patients, occasionally on a sticky pad so she could take them back to the desk computer to complete their paperwork, instead of doing it there on the one in the room like everyone else. I would then occasionally see those sticky notes being stuffed into one of her many expensive purses. Always had flashy expensive accessories. Fairly sure she was routinely committing identity theft, fraud. A male nurse would occasionally only administer a fraction of the dispensed IV painkiller to the patient and would use crafty sleight of hand to pocket the bottle while pretending to dispose of it. I guess with things being so hectic in the ER and the patient not know what 2 cc's of the med felt like versus 10 cc's, I don't think they ever got caught. When you can get called to do in-house substances testing at any moment, that guy either had balls of steel or was selling it. And then there's all the stuff, messing around with patients that were too out of it to know what was going on, etc. Not sure what was worse. Story 19. Back when I was in the Navy in the 90s, I caught 3 sailors duck it out in E2 while I was on integrity watch. The jet was rocking when it should not have been moving. I got the watch officer. It didn't end well for them. 2 dudes, 1 girl. Story 20. I was doing setup in a data center that had just been refurbished and expanded. The racks for all the systems were only partially set up. At the floor the size of a football field was a maze of racks, partial racks, boxes, raised floor parts, warning sawhorses, and lots of cable spools. It was early morning, like 8 a.m., and I kept hearing what sounded like a spinning motor or a pneumatic socket wrench whirring on and off. I went to see who was there so early, and I got a glimpse of the head of our help desks sitting on a cable spool. She had a cordless drill with some kind of buy attachment just grinding away at her. She was fully clothed in jeans, mind you, but I guess playing polish the bean salad through her clothing. Frottage a la DeWalt. Her face was in deep concentration like James Brown at the last song of his set. I slowly backed away, and I don't think she saw me. It was so hard to keep eye contact with her afterwards when we passed in the hallways. Story 21. I didn't see it, but a former boss, owner of a shop I worked at, would brag about getting BJ in the back office during work while being married with a kid on the way. He would also brag about how he had his college paid for by his parents for 7 years because he kept switching majors. His dad also gave him the loan to open the store. Also, he had a substances and escort habit, using all the profit in cash we made that day. On that, I left after a year and the store only lasted a few more years. I wonder why. Stand-up guy. Story 22. Shift manager got blackout drunk, hit his head, needed staples, left in an ambulance. Come back to his next shift and no warnings or write-ups. Story 23. In the Air Force, a long time ago, we had a pilot that was being an ass. It was hot and humid as we were in Southeast Asia. Usually they are pretty cool. Not this douche. We were waiting for the crew to show. We had pre-flighted the aircraft. My coworker took the pilot's headset. The headset had a piece that holds the mic that goes next to your mouth, and my coworker ran it down the crack of his sweaty, hairy ass and hung it back up. This particular pilot would almost have the mic touching his lips. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Story 24. I worked for an HR outsourcing company. One of our top salespeople was a hot redhead who liked to wear miniskirts and go commando, and she'd bend from the waist to get files from bottom drawers. I can say with complete certainty that the carpet matched. Story 25. Used to manage a Dunkin' Donuts. I would smoke a cigarette while taking trash out all the time with no worries. This tweaker lady I worked with, and I decided it's too damn hot. Let's just blaze it in the freezer. First time I agreed to do it, we smoke. I hear bell ring, customer entering store, and run out to help. It's 2 cops and 2 DIA agents coming to get donuts and coffee 10 minutes before closing. Talk about luck. I was tripping so hard because I knew they could smell it. I was trying to be calm and slick and stated, "We honor and value y'all's service, it's on the house," thinking they might take it as a bribe or peace offering. And they sat there just staring at me while drinking coffee and eating their free donuts while I cleaned all baked out. Substances at the time was very illegal in my state back in 2010, and if caught would have been arrested and all that crap. Doesn't help, I was carrying a pocket gun and would be ducked federally as well. Story 26. Cook doing a waitress in the walk-in cooler on top of a sack of potatoes. Everybody knew. No one got fired. They finished and went back to work. Those potatoes saw a lot of ass that summer. Story 27. I didn't see it, but when I worked at a summer camp, one of the male counselors was flirting with me and admitted to smoke it multiple times a day. Every day. A month or 2 later, he got fired. Not for anything related to that, but because someone saw him smoking when he was at home on his week off. Story 28. Got my first job at Country Club in 2004. I was 15. My boss was taking me on a tour of the place. Showed me the boiler room where people hang out and smoke. We walked in and the head chef was hitting a crack pipe. I watched the head chef and my boss smoke substances in the first 30 minutes of working there. That turned out to be the best job I will ever have, but I didn't realize it until it was gone. Place was a madhouse of substances, booze, easy work, and massive tips. Story 29. I worked with a woman that was close to, but just in a kind of bro way. Anyway, I was telling her one of the best parts of being a guy is pee blasting poo stains off the toilet bowl. The conversation was one that had both of us in tears. A few days later, I was peeing at work and happened to be pee blasting poo stains. So I thought I'd film it. I got as far as pulling my phone out before I realized it was a bad idea. I told her my mental lapse, and we chuckled about how stupid I was. Story 30. I had a coworker that would change into his gym clothes in his cubicle at the end of every day. There were only guys on the floor and everyone genuinely liked him, but it was weird seeing him shirtless, boxers every day at 5 p.m. Story 31. The time a cook threw a steak into the water trap under the sink for the dishes and let the dishwater out into the steak. He then pissed on it and threw it on the grill. He was ranting the whole time. I quietly spoke to the manager and he was fired. Thankfully, the nasty steak never left the kitchen. He was pissed. I snitched but I wasn't letting that happen to a customer. Also, I was the dishwasher, and his little tantrum was messing with my work. Flow customer took an elephant-sized wet crap on the floor in the bathroom. I was told I had to clean it. I said absolutely not. I'm not a biohazard cleanup person. I don't know that person or what kind of weird, nasty business they got going on. Manager and assistant manager ducking in the projection booth of the theater we worked in. She was several years younger, not a minor than him. He was married. Story 32. No one liked our boss, who was a senior vice president of a Fortune 500 company. We all went out for drinks one Thursday night to a bar near work before the pandemic, and someone went back in that night and took a creamy crap in the doorway of our boss's office door. Our boss's admin didn't know what to do when she got to work, so she just put a small recycling bin over it until maintenance came to clean it up. All of us were interviewed, but no one was caught. Story 33. My old boss was a goldmine for this crap. He used to watch adult film at work. He would scream and swear at his employees. It was literally a point of pride for him that he made all of us cry at least once. He would offer substances and alcohol. He harassed and assaulted multiple people. He was a raging alcoholic who decided that we were no longer going to serve alcohol at staff parties because he got a DUI one time. Instead of sober or going to rehab like a normal person. Dude was a goldmine for that crap. And since he was in charge of lastly the entire company, had the entire board of directors in his pocket, and we didn't have an HR department, he got away with all of it for years. Story 34. The amount of sex happening in the cooler at the KFC I used to work at is too damn high. But not for us cooks, though. We were all just high. Also, I know people who quit working at well-known five-star restaurants because they didn't want to establish the substances habit that would allow them to keep up with the other cooks. But my favorite of all, the mechanic who worked at a mining company who thought it would be a good idea to put the laptops that had just come back from site through the parts washer, as in the one they use for washing and degreasing car, truck, exact parts. Granted, they were dusty and had various liquid marks on the palm rests, so I was kind of happy he did it, but the boss wasn't. Story 35. Super should have been fired. In the military in a classroom full of essentially 6-foot tables facing across each other. Guy decides now's the time to tug one out to completion in the middle of the class being instructed. Girl next to me, is he doing what I think he's doing? Me, he sure is. Thankfully, he was quick, and by the time we alerted the instructor, he was finished. All that happened was the guy was reprimanded and removed from the course. Now he is still in and has a golden chit, a medical limitation that allows him to go do it whenever he needs. Story 36. Industrial facility, chemical related. Night shift was a skeleton crew, like 6 of us. There was a woman working in our crew who would meet the supervisor out in the parking lot for adult activities in the middle of the night. They didn't think the rest of us knew when they would disappear. We would all hang out in the control room, watching it on the parking lot surveillance camera. To her credit, she had zero gag reflex. Went on for months. Eventually it came out when another employee felt he was being picked on by the supervisor. After he had a conflict with the woman mentioned earlier, it ended up something was said, went to HR, she was let go, he retired. They still got away with it for months, though. Story 37. I'm a male night nurse in a hospital. Recently, a trend amongst the ladies I work with on my floor has started to emerge, where they all read the same smut books at work and talk, laugh about them as they go, kind of like a weird book club. I just find it amusing how it's cute and funny for girls to openly engage in adult film at work. But if I was publicly reading Morning Glory Milking Farm and telling my colleagues about the plotline, it'd hit very differently. Wow, I don't mind it. I largely keep to myself so I don't hear it too much. And honestly, some of the crap that happens in these books is legitimately hilarious. Like it's wild what can get published in 2025. Story 38. The person making the shift schedule didn't realize 2 of the people he scheduled were married. Wife kept her last name. They were scheduled for a night shift, just the 2 of them. I went into work in the evening because I needed to get some admin stuff done. And as soon as I walked through the door, I heard it. Clap, clap, clap. Story 39. Coworker went to a company outing and began aggressively, drunkenly asking for sex. Said no. She offered anal. I said no. Found out the next day she was engaged. Story 40. My first job when I was young and easily influenced, I got in with the wrong crowd. Our half-hour lunch routine was smoke a joint on the walk to the pub, pint of Stella, plus a Jack Daniels chaser on Friday as we got 45 minutes. Finish the joint on the walk back, quick line of Coke to get back on a level in the toilet back at the factory. Then we'd operate machinery and forklift trucks all afternoon. Only day we didn't go was Monday as the pub was closed. We did this for 4 years until I left. This was 25 years ago. One guy who was the ringleader and about 15 years older than me still works there and is absolutely ducked up. nervous twitch, stuttering, a shell of his former cocky, womanizing self. Story 41. True story. On my first company-wide sales meeting I attended in 2013 in Arizona on the last night, about 40 of the 200 attendees all got too drunk at the open bar and went into the massive heated hotel pool naked. Breasts in my face and lap dances from 40-plus-year-old coworkers were something at 22 I wasn't expecting to experience in a work setting. Seeing these people in work meeting weeks after left me so confused, but still to this day, I think about how that wouldn't happen ever again in today's environment. Story 42. Company had a manager's retreat in Las Vegas, a little reward for an excellent year. We had a few meetings, and at the last meeting, a woman arrived to train us on sales and marketing. She started going through some charts, but a few minutes in, she turned on some music and started stripping, dancing around the room mostly naked. The general manager had hired an escort for our business meeting. It was funny, weird, and totally inappropriate. 2 female and 2 devout Christian managers immediately left. Strange time, but nobody was fired. Story 43, 9th grade shop, engines class. 2 students were sawing a piece of angle iron with a chop saw, but they supported the piece that was supposed to fall off, so it fell inward and pinched the blade, which promptly exploded, sending shrapnel everywhere. No one was hurt, but no one had safety glasses on. Everyone nearby, myself included, threw our glasses on immediately after it blew up. The teacher heard from the other side of the yard, so he ran over and was glad everyone had their glasses on, as he was always telling us to do, and explained what went wrong. He never knew we didn't have them on. Very unsafe. Story 44. I saw a 50-plus-year-old woman take a pair of shorts off of a coworker's desk and parade them around office, exclaiming, "Whose shorts are these?" The other women laughed at it, but another worker tried them on under her skirt to see how short they really were. My supervisor said for me not to look as I was the only guy that worked there. I filed a former complaint, and far as I know, nothing happened. Imagine if a guy did that. Story 45. I work in AE, so my whole job is NSFW by most work standards. But I think the worst was on a Friday night, seeing a girl give a guy she met in the waiting room a BJ while they were both still in the waiting room. They were both intoxicated, and I'm pretty sure he had sold her some substances because another patient said he had offered him substances too. Story 46. There's a Redditor in one of the NSFW subs taking nude photos after hours in communal areas at my old workplace. I can see my old team's workspace in the background of some of her photos. And in a not got away with it story, a customer service worker at an old company got super drunk at the Xmas party one year and did a full-blown striptease on the table in front of 900 staff and their spouses. Not only was she fired from the company over the weekend, but they didn't just box up her things. Instead, management removed her whole workstation from the work pod to drive the point home that she was never coming back. Story 47. Not witnessed by me, but when I was a med student at a hospital. One night I was working, there was a rapid response called, "Get the doctors, full nursing support, ICU team, and pharmacists to the room for quick treatment." Turned out to be nothing but the residents didn't show up. The attending did. Attending was pissed and went to look for them. He discovered in the call room having sex. Everyone in the hospital found out. They didn't get fired or suspended because it's a severely understaffed safety net hospital, so they couldn't afford to lose any of the residents. Story 48. Love stating it. Not enough chances come up. I worked the late-night sorting shift at a bank when I was a teen. I used to bring my girlfriend so we could get it on when the delivery drivers finished their drop-off. A lot fewer cameras in the world at the time. We screwed on many surfaces in the sorting and boardroom. The pinnacle was sex in the vault when we thought someone was in the building. She had always wanted to have sex in a zero light room. For me, it was being in the sealed vault. That's right, safe sex story 49. Co-worker clearly watching adult film with headphones on. I couldn't see the screen, but I could sure hear it from across the room, through their headphones. I took them aside and told them, either I never hear or see your adult film ever again, or I'm making a trip to HR. This is my one and only warning. Story 50. I fell off of one of those big rolling ladders while trying to remove a suspended sign in the most dangerous way possible. Definitely would have been fired if anyone important saw. Fortunately, no personnel or equipment was destroyed. Was absolutely not even remotely safe for work. Story 51. Manager was sleeping with over 17 different coworkers on and off the clock. She was caught 4 separate times doing it on the clock and on store property, but they apparently just joined. She would target specific people she was attracted to shortly after they got hired, tempting them to hang out with her to get them alone by offering booze, substances, or just invites to a exclusive party at her place. If that didn't work, she would wait until the ones she really liked earned themselves some attendance points. before offering to take them away for a price. She finally got caught by someone who wasn't interested in her crap, and everyone involved got fired. Good old Wally world. Story 52. We were on a work trip in Japan and out one night with our Japanese colleagues, including one woman who was the admin person for the Tokyo office. My boss had more than a few drinks and leaned over to her and said, "I want to lick you." She giggled it off in the most Japanese way, but we all fully expected HR to be waiting for us next morning to escort us straight to the airport. Nope. We carried on for the next week as if nothing happened. Story 53. I saw one of my coworkers take a bump off the bathroom sink. She turned and flipped me off, then blew me a kiss, then mimed like she was due HJ into her face. All of this in a hallway with other employees around. She got a talking to and kept her job. Didn't last much longer, though. Story 54. I used to work at a local news station in San Francisco. I worked the weekend as a PA when there were probably 10 people in the entire building. Almost every Saturday, I'd walk by the sports department and a certain anchor would be watching adult film. Screen was facing towards the doorway. That was saved on his computer, old Windows media player. I was so amazed at how chill he was just watching adult film on his computer, wearing a blanket. This was in 2006. Story 55. Walked into my restaurant after hours because I forgot to pull some frozen meat out to thaw. I opened the walk-in and found 2 male servers having a right go at it. Closed the door and left. Both of them were straight with a girlfriend and a wife. Never spoke a word about it to anyone, and neither did they. We are still friends to this day, and they are married with kids now. Story 56. Oversaw 3 other employees as a team lead. We were working for another company on site and were preparing the novel server for migration. Came across a users folder with a large amount of files in size. A lot of videos, so one of my colleagues opened a few up. They all involved a female. Brought it up to the site's HR rep. She watched the videos and her eyes bugged right out. Has a meeting with the employee. Didn't get fired, just got his hand slapped. Story 57. Former coworker was known to be an adult film addict, to the point management intervened and had to have a talk with him. We'll always remember when shift change was happening and I'm talking to a first shift friend. Dude walks by with his iPad towards the bathrooms. Only thing I heard from the speakers was, "And it was a 6-sex coworker," and I just looked at each other like, what the heck, before walking away. It's honestly kind of sad. Our industry is so short of people that they tolerate what should be fireable offenses so long as people stay. Story 58. Having sex with one of the senior clients when I worked as a caregiver on the hospice unit at a retirement community. The individual I'm referring to was a male ducking a woman. I would definitely say that he was the victim and not her. She tried to duck all the guys that worked at this particular location, and no, she didn't have dementia or anything of that nature. She did have some other terminal crap, but she used to offer each one of us $1,000 apiece for some quality time. Story 59. Didn't actually witness, but was told to me after the fact. In the old kitchen I worked in, one of the cooks held up a pineapple core and asked one of the coworkers if he knew of any magic tricks to make it disappear. Next thing you know, his pants are down in the kitchen, trying to shove the core up ensued, while the owner of the restaurant was walking through the kitchen. Surprisingly wasn't fired. Was told to knock that crap off and wash your ducking hands and don't let me see that again. Story 60. Caught a teacher being inappropriate with a student. Reported it. I got bullied to change schools by the other teachers and students. The teacher got promoted to principal of an all-girls high school. Story 61. I had several coworkers who hit people while on the job. I even hit a couple of dogs while at work. I worked for the railroad, and when we hit things, they tend to pass. Story 62. Not in the traditional sense, but my old manager. He would regularly harass my office mate, who was a younger guy. Manager wasn't gay, but thought it was funny to repeatedly make fun of the employees about his sexuality. He was also not gay, but I guess manager thought it was hilarious to imply that he was. Went so far as to make jokes when he got married that he was surprised it was to a woman. Not only did nothing happen, the employee invited manager to his wedding. Story 63. He was actively pleasure himself while watching hot films in his office when his supervisor walked in and saw him in the act. He didn't get fired for that. Just 5 days unpaid. He eventually got fired, 3 years later, for other equally disturbing reason. When we cleaned out his office to get it ready for the next person, we found bottles of pee, semen marks, all underneath the desk side walls and undercarriage, and other biohazards. Story 64. I'm a mechanic. Every shop I've worked in, people are having some drinks on the job, usually passing a cigarette around on breaks. It's a very stressful job. People's lives count on you doing it right, and also quickly. Their income, their kids' school, all on hold, while you try to get them back rolling. And most importantly, their safety after they drive it home. It's a lot of pressure. Story 65. Walked into the manager's office of an extremely popular Florida beachside establishment to get my paycheck. More of a broom closet, if you ask me. To my manager getting due BJ by one of the hotter waitresses next to a sizable pile of substances on the desk. I took my check and left. Not because of what I saw, but for other reasons. That whole section of the establishment burned down and was rebuilt, still thriving to this day. Story 66. I used to work at a smallish firm and would sometimes have to remote into computers. One time I had to remote in and saw stacks of tabs of adult film on a dude's computer. I didn't mention anything, but it was awkward knowing his wife was working in the next office nearby. He wouldn't get fired anyway because he was the CEO, owner. What's your craziest NSFW story that happened at work? Story 1. Didn't happen to me, but a coworker brought her dog into work and it immediately raced towards the new intern guy, who no one really knew that well yet, and started jumping all over him and trying to get him to pick him up. The guy joked about having bacon in his pocket, but we all suspected our coworker was ducking the intern. And we were right. Story 2. The guy I replaced at my heavy equipment job was fired because apparently he was pleasure himself in his excavator at night during the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. Nobody knew about it until he accidentally sent the pictures, video to our boss instead of his girlfriend. They literally hired a company to come steam clean the cab of that cat 390. Story 3. I work in a manufacturing factory that uses a lot of robots to assemble pieces together. The machinery has all sorts of cages, barriers, and safety lockouts to prevent people from injuring themselves. One day, a box had gotten stuck inside the machine and wouldn't come out. So a worker disabled every safety mechanism and started crawling through a narrow path in the equipment, similar to the size of a ventilation shaft in a Die Hard movie, so that he could clear the box from being jammed. Got fired immediately. Story 4. Been working at a mental hospital as a cook for a few months. Recently, while I was serving lunch to all the other patients, one of them decided to crawl into the dish pit. I heard groaning near the end of my line of patients. Go to the dish pit, look around the corner, and there's red liquid everywhere. Hit his wrists and throat. I ran for help. He grabbed the knife and was keeping us from getting it away from him. They got the knife from him and an ambulance showed up, but he passed shortly after. Horrific. Story 5, not me, but a supervisor I used to work with. He worked for Stanley Steamer. One day he went into work and was called into the Mustang Ranch. He couldn't wait to get to the job for the day. Said there was a lot of DNA in the room he had to clean. Story 6. I used to do it support for a charity that supplied housing and support for homeless people. A large proportion also had mental health issues. So there were a fair amount of interesting events that happened. Being in it, I avoided experiencing most of it firsthand, though I was threatened with being stabbed on about my 3rd day. Anyway, I come in one Monday, and there's an email labeled urgent saying there was an incident at the stairwell of one of the properties on Sunday night, and could I pull the relevant SecTV footage and put it on a DVD. I had to do this fairly frequently. I skipped through the footage, find the incident, usually a fight or blatant substances dealing, and burn it to DVD for the police. The email never mentioned what the incident was, so I skipped through the footage and watch as a clearly very agitated man ties a rope around a stair rail at the top of the stairs, then looks over the rail, and then just casually tips forward over it. So yeah, that was pretty NSFW. Story 7. 2 girls I work with were talking, and one asked the other, "Who at work would you give a BJ to?" The answer was me. Girl 1 told me what Girl 2 said, and I approached Girl 2 about it. She do BJ behind the cardboard baling machine in the back storehouse. Story 8. I made an offhand comment about how my boss and another female manager, his direct report, were always nowhere to be found at the same time. She accused me of spreading rumors they were sleeping together. I found a new job. They're now married with a kid. Story 9. The first company I worked for used to have these junior orientation parties that would take place in one of the company's offices all over the world. Then, they permanently canceled them when a director had sex with an employee. Story 10. Police came to inspect all the gas pipes in our labs, looking at the ease of accessibility and recent output. Turns out that the doctor who had been getting a lot of sympathy after his wife and daughter passed, in a car that was filled with carbon monoxide, had in fact filled 2 giant exercise balls with the gas, created a slow leak in them, and put them in the car she drove. Also, someone once disposed of chemicals in the wrong container, and there was a significant explosion in the waste room. Luckily, no one was in there and no one got hurt. Story 11. Retail worker here. It's hard to pin down the craziest, but former worker comes in high as a kite on something one evening and heads upstairs, offices, break room, etc. She strips down naked in the hallway, lays down in front of the time clock, and proceeds to piss and pleasure herself right there on the floor. It was a little later, so not a ton of workers on the clock, but finally an older employee walks in on it and tells her she shouldn't be doing that. Not my store, but a buddy who was involved when it happened at a different location. He was up doing office work when someone went racing past the office door, another manager in hot pursuit. Other manager yells for help, so friend takes of after them. Figures out the man running found the roof access stairs and had made it up and out them. Get to the roof. Man is completely naked, threatening to jump. Not a tall building. They are able to tackle him and hold him until authorities arrive. Story 12. We had a woman start an overnight clerical job just doing data entry type of stuff. Pretty basic. Day 1 of training by me, we set her up at the computer. I ask her to go ahead and log in. She doesn't understand what I mean. I tell her use the mouse or hit a button on the keyboard to bring up the login fields. She manages to get through this part. I tell her to double-click on warehouse management software. She doesn't understand what I mean by double-click. I tell her use the mouse. She doesn't know what I mean by the mouse. Okay, she may have overstated her abilities in the interview, but whatever, we need help. Fast forward 2 weeks, and she was fired. It turns out she was ducking guys in the locker room for payment and got caught. Real classy lady. Story 13. A guy I worked with was at an old lady's house to do some electrical work, and he had to move a bookshelf. When he moved it, a bag fell and landed on his foot, breaking one of his toes. When he looked into the bag, he saw that it was full of gigantic sex toy. When he reported the incident to the company, he wrote, "A literal bag of junks crushed my foot." Those incident reports go all the way to the CEO of the company. And when he was visiting our office one time, he asked us where he could find the fella with the junk bag. Story 14. 2 people were escorted out because they were caught having sex in one of the stalls. Worked at a very large factory, 20,000 people per shift. A section supervisor went into the bathroom to piss and heard the woman getting her cheeks clapped. She then tried to say she was helping him tie his shoes. They were both banned for life and not allowed to work for any of the company's suppliers. Story 15. Lovely senior co-worker of mine, Barbara. She had full-blown ADHD, but she was super peppy, loved talking to people, decorated the office and everything. One day I'm going out with another group of my co-workers, and we turn to say goodbye. Babs jumps up from her seat. "You ladies heading out for a party? Without me? I can be fun too, you know." In the span of 2 seconds, she undoes her bra from underneath her shirt, whips it out from one sleeve, and lassos it around. Her boss is sitting right behind her in a cubicle, with fully transparent glass walls. We hastily say our goodbyes and urge her to put her bra away before she gets in trouble. She reluctantly tucks it away in her bag. She was fired shortly afterwards because she frequently misplaced things, forgot to schedule appointments, and needed reminders for just about everything. I miss her a lot. Story 16. It's not really mine, but one of my coworkers was having a bad day, so another trashier coworker decided she'd flash them to cheer them up. Flash them her tits right at the main workstation under a bunch of cameras. Fired immediately for trying to cheer someone up with titties. Story 17. The HR manager at one place I worked got fired after being caught pleasure herself in her office. That part's not that crazy. The crazy part was she had a camera installed in the men's restroom and was watching men's backs while they used the urinals. Story 18. Not my workplace, but in a warehouse. Across the street, some poor guy was crushed by a pallet of wine. Don't know how, don't know why. All I know is that he was in his early to mid-40s and a week from retirement because his wife came into an unexpected inheritance. Poor guy made me think of every action movie where a cop is hitting a few weeks from retirement. Only instead of bullets, it was a pallet of wine. Story 19. Family came to my office for a closing. Their 10-year-old kid used the bathroom and crap all over the place. He used his hands like a paintbrush and the walls were his canvas. Story 20. Guy went into the women's toilets and tried to steal a sanitary bin, the bin for used period products, but got chased out. He then ran into the baby changing unit and stole the dirty nappy bin instead. Then he dashed into the gents and dumped the dirty nappies on the floor, proceeding to smear them all over himself while furiously masturbating. Staff blocked off the entrance to the hallway while they waited for security to arrive. But the fella bounced out the gents and down a fire escape before he could be stopped. Disappeared down a back street like a 6-footer skid mark on legs, never to be seen again. I thankfully was not on shift that day, but there was a certain 1,000-yard stare on the people that were. Nobody in that entire building was paid enough to deal with that. Story 21. Guy drove a crane into overhead power lines, sparks, and transformer fuse blew. Had to wait inside the vehicle for a couple of hours. Not sure if the lines were still energized. Story 22. Everyone running with the cardboard baler gag, and nobody knows it's a ducking baler. It makes bales out of cardboard. Like a hay baler makes bales out of hay, not bales. Story 23. Was working on the HVAC of an occupied retirement home. Walking down the hallway, I see a female resident walking around without a shirt, like it's something she did every day. I quickly found an employee and let them know. 80-year-old tits. Not something I expected to see until I got to my 80s. Story 24. Worked a crappy building security job years and years ago. On a night shift, my coworker came into the security center laughing and said that while in the lobby, he called an elevator, and when it opened, there was a man and woman in there ducking. The guy didn't stop or make eye contact, just kept pounding, while the woman, who was standing bent over, was trying to close the elevator button while moaning and groaning, but kept hitting the open button, while my coworker stood there in shock. I guess this went on for a minute before she said, "Duck it," and just kept ducking, while looking dead into his eyes, getting off, and then the elevator door closed. He called another elevator, but it was empty. Story 25. A place where I worked and my mother still works at had a manager who was always kind of suspected to be fooling around with the young seasonal hires. The man is in his 40s and on his second marriage, kids from both of their previous marriages, and I think one or two together, something like 8 kids. It was one of those situations where it's clear something was going on, but no one ever had proof, and no one wanted to risk getting fired or picked on for saying anything or just wanted to keep out of it altogether. It blew up in his face just earlier this year when he was caught with one of the young ladies by 2 others behind a compost pile. Story 26. When I, 42M, was 19, I worked as a line cook at Applebee's, and we had a cleaning crew come in that night towards the end of the shift to clean the vents above the grill and fryers. One of the guys was taking off the vent above the fryer station, and he, for some reason, stood braced on the sides of the fryer, assuming they were cooled down. They were not. They were propped still above 300. His foot slipped and went into the fryer all the way up above his ankle, submerging his work boot. He immediately pulled his foot out, screamed, and then, in a panic, pulled his boot off. Story 27. I worked at a very buttoned-up corporate company in sales. I have pretty bad ibs, and although good at sales, I always had nervous turds, which meant frequent bathroom trips. But this one guy from the office would always pleasure himself in the restroom. I'm talking dead quiet. Shweesh, shweesh. The problem was, he was a guy that talked to everyone and leaned on their desks, carrying around his water bottle. But every single dude knew he was doing it. I brought it up to a coworker in another department, and he was like, "Yeah, that's Dan. Everyone knows, but you can't really turn him in because there's no proof," which was true. How do you bring proof to management of a guy pleasure himself in a bathroom stall? I was glad I worked on the road 80% of the time. Story 28. When reviewing my training center's accident book, I found an entry where one of the tutors went to close the blinds and they fell on her. After being treated for a small cut and signing the book, she returned to her room only for one of her heels to snap, causing her to trip and bang on the doorframe. I'd say she was Nesfabiu that day. Either that, or when Stu got his junk stuck in the photocopier. Story 29. I was supposed to be training a new guy. With 12 hours to kill together, one thing led to another, and I ended up due BJ in the gourd shack. Midway through the BJ, I said, "I'm supposed to be training you," and we busted out laughing. Story 30. I worked at a commercial dubbing facility in LA 2008. At the time, we would duplicate commercials or media on DVDs with location-specific information, i.e. a Lexus commercial with local dealer info, etc. So my job was to spot-check QC, quality control, the DVDs or tapes, to ensure they didn't have any artifacts, issues. Well, one day I had a job to review an investor video for Callahan Golf Clubs. 6 DVDs were produced, labeled and everything for board meetings, etc. So the first video was good, guy talking new product, etc. The next one I reviewed was different. It started with a couple of dwarfs in clown makeup. A man and woman. I searched forward a minute or so and lo and behold, the clown dwarfs start ducking. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a joke or test. So I checked the remaining 5 DVDs and found one more in the stack. Someone at the company had duplicated some ducked-up adult film for private use, and it got into the mix. It caused a bit of a crap storm. Management called a group meeting, notifying the facility workers what had happened. Of course, no one confessed, but I can only imagine what would have happened if those videos had been delivered. Lamau Story 31. There was the guy who worked on the top floor, 3rd of my building, who took the elevator all the time. He smoked so much that the smell would stay in the elevator long after he left and when the door would open on my floor. I would be hit by it as I sat at my desk nearby. Guy was an ad salesman and they fired him one day. He took a box of his belongings and got into the elevator on the 3rd. And when he exited the 1st floor, there was a huge pile of steaming man crap in the elevator. Story 32. When I worked at Domino's, one of my male coworkers was caught pleasure himself in his car just before coming back into the store. In the middle of his shift, right after a delivery, he was fired on the spot. Story 33. One of my first jobs out of high school was event security. For an idiotic reason, there was a rumor I wasn't scared of anything but an attractive woman going around the office. I ended up getting scheduled for an overnight job with a really attractive girl. Job was in the stadium February postgame. It was freezing, wet, and cold once they started rinsing the whole place down. We found one of the camera stations was unlocked. Gave us a decent view of the crap. We were supposed to keep an eye on, and there were some moving blankets we could huddle under for warmth. Me and the girl get to talking. She asks about the rumor. I say, I'm not scared. She say, prove it. So I grabbed a boob. She called me an idiot. I was supposed to kiss her first, and I ended up getting a BJ in the camera box. Weirdly, rumor still didn't die after that. Story 34. Used to work at a shoe retail store, and my manager was super horny all the time. Our manager, F, was dating one of the new workers, M, and they were pretty open about it. They'd sneak a few hookups every now and then, but kept it pretty tame. But then another worker, F, was hired, and our manager started hooking up with her pretty often. At first, it was kind of hot seeing two girls making out at work, but it honestly became a bit annoying. I worked almost all my shifts with them, and anytime they both were gone, they were making out in our back stockroom. I remember having to step over them a few times because they were ducking on the dirty floor. I never said anything because I was young and it was hot, but it was pretty annoying having to do all the work while they just ducked each other. They never paired up the manager with her boyfriend to avoid them duck, but they always paired my manager up with the new girl. I think they knew too. Story 35. I worked with an older, I was 26, she was mid-30s, married girl in an office with cubicles, and she sat directly across from me. She would always flirt, like major flirting, and she thought it was cute that I'd get embarrassed. One day, she sent me a text that she wasn't wearing panties. I turned around, and when she saw my look, she spread her legs apart. I was instantly hard and horny, but I tried to play it off. She then asked me if I'd give her a lift to Sonic to get an iced tea, and I obliged. She told me to turn off into this parking garage where she started kissing me, and then unzipped my pants and gave me the most passionate BJ I've ever had. I was in love. Another time, she texted me she was in the restroom. These were single stalls, and she wanted me to join her. I went, knocked. She let me in and bent over the sink and told me to fill me up so I can feel it dripping out of me for the rest of the day. Oh boy, did I take her up on that offer. One day, I met her husband in the parking lot. Her car was in the shop, and he seemed like an extremely nice guy, so I ended up breaking things off with her. Story 36. In high school many years ago, I worked at a Papa John's as a delivery guy. It was managed by two mid-30s dudes who were just trashy, duck-up slime balls. One of these guys eventually started a relationship. Well, there was an office with one of those one-way mirror windows, but if you got close enough to it from the outside, you could see in a tiny bit, or at least make out figures or what people were doing, but shadowy. Another coworker caught the two having a nice ducking on the office desk. Story 37. I went on a Tinder date. She worked at a Hampton Inn and had a few hours left to go, so we met up and chatted a bit. She had to help some customers and left me in the back office. There was a photocopier, and I thought it would be funny to photocopy my bare behind. So I went ahead, dropped my pants, and hopped up on the thing. The glass broke into a million pieces as the light wand started the photocopy. I jumped off, brushed the glass off, closed the copier, and pretended that didn't just happen. Her boss found the photocopies of my hairy butt in the copier tray on Monday. Story 38. I worked at a place that educated on blindness by giving them a sight stick and guiding them through completely darkened rooms to give an idea of daily life as a blind person, guided by the blind. Needless to say, some things happen in the dark. Most of it is innocent and usually more funny than anything else. People being scared that it's like a haunted house, bumping into things like that. Two things come to mind for this, though. The first was when a group of adults on a workday out had decided to start drinking in the afternoon. This led to one of the guys basically just assaulting his coworkers, groping them, etc. Obviously, the client's safety is something we as guides were told to keep in mind. We cut the tour short and kicked the guy out. The rest didn't finish the tour either, but then went home separately, don't know if something ever came of it. Another one is something I wasn't present for, but during my first few weeks while I was in training, I asked what some of the weirdest or worst experiences were. One of them told me about how a group of teens on a field trip were making out, and possibly more, possibly because obviously the guide couldn't see what happened either, but the noises were obvious. Also, dishonorable mention to one of my coworkers, an old man telling my boss, who was a young woman, to take her clothes off during the summer and start dancing in a bikini or something. Story 39. Started working at a big bank in NYC after graduating college. Large sky skier. Many different tenants, so you had to badge through security to access your elevator. Important for later. First day on the job. I'm introducing myself to the team and find out an analyst hired the previous year also graduated from the same school as me. Cool. We became work friends, and pretty routinely, I would eat lunch with her and two guys from a different department. Fast forward 6 months, I come in one morning and my boss is visibly distraught. I don't think too much of it. Grab a coffee, and soon after, two security personnel approach us with boxes, walk directly to the analyst sitting beside me, and ask her to grab her belongings, and then proceed to walk her off the floor. I look at my boss, like what if, but she refuses to tell me anything. Immediately, I ping the guys and ask if they're down for lunch. One responds, sure, for our normal time. We sit down for lunch and I ask where Guy 2 is and he says, well, here's the thing. Analyst and Guy 2, apparently, went out for drinks last night. Decided to come back and duck in the office. They're both fired. Security discovered badge scans at 2 a.m. and a used condom in the stairwell. Story 40. One of our married VPs was getting a BJ from the receptionist in the stairwell. His wife was my direct manager and I could never tell her what I knew. I knew because the building security showed the video to me. Story 41. I used to work the night shift as a server for a diner-style restaurant. One night, a super drunk couple came in and were being loud and obnoxious. So of course my co-server said she didn't want the table, and she would just take the next one if I took them. I agreed because money is money and I'm not going to snub my nose at someone more or less paying for my Uber home. I got to the table, and after 5 minutes of feeling like I was talking to toddlers, trying to coax a drink order out, the lady stops, looks at me and asks my cup size. I smiled and tried to laugh it off like a joke, because I honestly thought it was. She asked again after a few seconds, and I kind of stammered, thinking to myself, she can't be serious, but ended up telling her to hopefully get her to stop asking. At the time, I was a 40-did, which is roughly the size of a small cantaloupe for anyone wondering. I watched this woman take in the information for a second, think about it, and then look at her husband. She then looks back at me and, in a surprisingly calm voice, asked, "Can my husband touch them? I'll give you all the cash I have left." It was incredibly awkward, and I almost said no because I didn't know how much she had in cash. But I was a server who was maybe going to get 2 or 3 tables after them, so I would take any penny I could get. So I let the guy touch my boobs for about 2 minutes, and the lady gave me all the cash in her wallet. I left that night with $40 in tips and $220 in titty-touching money. Much to my own surprise, I didn't regret it then, and to this day, I still don't. Story 42. This was the summer between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college. I was working concessions at a movie theater. On one exceptionally slow and cold night, our manager sent all the staff home before the last 2 showings except for me and the girl working box office. When we closed up for the night, I told box office girl that she could go early while I cleaned up the lobby. She thanked me, grabbed her jacket, and ducked out while talking to someone on her cell phone. When I left and locked the doors behind me, I saw box office girl waiting outside, nearly freezing to death and on the verge of tears. I asked what was wrong, and she said, "I've been waiting for my ride for nearly 30 minutes, and they haven't shown. I called several times, and they stopped answering their phone. I'm so pissed off right now." I asked her where she lived, and I recognized the address she told me, so I offered to drive her home. We talked the whole drive about the theater and movies and what our plans are for when summer ends and we go back to school. Then box office girl said, "The last guy who drove me home after work asked me to help pay for the gas for the trouble. I didn't have any money, so I gave him a BJ. And I said, well, you aren't that far out of the way, so you don't owe me anything. Oh, hey, we're here. See you at work tomorrow." And she left. I am ashamed at how many years it took me to realize what had happened. Story 43. I feel like executive leadership in the hospitality, REST industry leads to an endless supply of these types of stories. Off the top of my head, 40-ish-year-old manager tells me he's taking a smoke. I take a bag of trash to the dumpsters to find said manager with a cigarette in one hand, and the hostess with one leg propped up on the dumpster in the other. Had a bartender overserve a guest? I convinced him to take a cab that I was paying for. After the car was dispatched, the guy asked for a water. As soon as I walked to grab it, he jumped in his car, spun the tires, leaving the parking lot, and no more than 100 yards down the road, drove through a brick wall, a brick embankment behind a house, and into a kitchen by way of a sliding glass door. I saw him running across the road after the accident. He was picked up by the police at a gas station across the street, trying to steal a Sixer. Had to deal with a lot of inappropriate behavior by male leadership and female staff. So many grimy guys out there. Story 44. This happened to my boss. I heard about it through him, so telling this secondhand. It's the mid-2010s and I'm doing PC repair at a small shop. A guy comes in during the week furious that his son has a ton of adult film on his PC and pays us to clean it all off. We do so, he pays, and all is good. Well, cut to a week later and Dad comes back in with the laptop telling us that we need to recover all of this because, as it turns out, that's how his son makes his money. Anyway, boss was able to recover it, or at least most of it. Story 45. I was an electrician and I was handing up stuff to my boss, who was on the roof with guy from the power company. I had just got back down the ladder when my boss started yelling to call an ambulance. Someone else did that, and I started up the ladder again, and my boss stopped me, told me to stay down there. The guy from the power company had a heart attack and dropped dead. He was dead before we even had a chance to call for any help. Story 46. Started flirting with the security guard at my job. He knew all the places to go to mess around and not get caught. bathroom after hours, outside where no camera could see us kiss, etc. One day we snuck into the back hall that no one used anymore, pulled my pants down and started going at it. Other security guard chose that day to patrol that area, which they never checked. Caught red-handed. He got fired and banned. I quit a few months later because I felt like he was always looking at me. We dated for 10 years after this. It's been about 12 years since it happened. He still has never tried going back out of pure embarrassment that his picture might be stapled to a board in the security office. Story 47. When I worked at a grocery store, we had an older lady pass out and die in the foyer during a particularly hot summer day. She was lying there for about 3 minutes before anyone realized what happened. I'm not sure if she was dead when we saw her, but the ambulance drove away without sirens, so presumably she died, or was already dead, inside the ambulance in our parking lot. I don't remember her name, but we did see the obituary, which confirmed she was 92 years old. Now that I'm older, I'm genuinely curious why a 92-year-old would be doing their own shopping in the middle of a heat wave. I feel like that's got to be the most NSFW thing in my work experience since it involves death. But I did lose my virginity in a ladies' restroom stall while employed at that same store, so that might fit this thread better. Then, there was the mystery poop in the dairy aisle. Story 48. I work for a large family-owned land clearing company in North Florida. While there is plenty to post on here, there's one story that will stick with me forever. Just a few months ago, I show up to Worm. We have one guy that's always in bad mood no matter what time it is or what he's doing for the day. Him and a supervisor start arguing, and another employee steps in to try and calm the situation a little bit. Supervisor starts arguing with second employee, and for some reason, supervisor pulls his junk out on him. Employee starts running through the shop and Woodyard screaming he pulled his junk out on me. It was brushed under the rug and everyone acted like nothing happened. Supervisor did a few counseling sessions with the owner on how to deal with situations, and the other employee quit shortly after. We also had an employee whoop another's ass last week, then strong-arm, rob him for $200 after it was over. I hate this place, but it sure is entertaining. Story 49. Not really NSFW, but I worked in a hair salon, and most of us suspected one of our coworkers to be on substances. Bad. She'd be normal on days when the manager was there, but on the days she wasn't in, the girl would come in fried out of her mind. We tried telling our manager, and for whatever reason, she didn't want to believe us. Well, the one day she came in zonked out of her mind. First client was a little old lady who wanted her hair curled with the iron. Co-worker was literally falling asleep with this hot-ass iron, centimeters away from poor little old lady's scalp. We all watched in horror for about 5 or so minutes, while someone called the manager who raced in record time, and co-worker was never seen again. Story 50. The admins started tracking how much time we were inside the office and how much time we weren't and started raising a stink over it. Someone figured out how to keep the emergency exit open without triggering any alarms. Everyone used the emergency exit until admin backtracked. Story 51. I work at a boat factory, and this story is from before my time. We build and sell directly to customers, so we don't have dealers for them. The customers always come by the factory to see how their boat is progressing. Through our production line, we try hard to be an open book because these are custom-built boats. A customer I know that has been with us for a long time was checking his boat with his salesman in our factory. When they opened the console, center of the boat, the compartment where the electronics and other equipment is mounted, search center console boats, they found an employee getting the soul sucked out of him by another female employee. It's a company classic. Story 52. I once got busy in a Burger King bathroom. Story time. I worked at Burger King in my youth, and Jenny was a coworker, friend of mine. We had flirted in and out of work, so there was already smoke between us. One day during a shift, I was sweeping the bathrooms. Jenny walked over and said, "Do you need someone to hold that stick for you?" I said something along the lines of, "You sure you can handle something this big?" She walked in the bathroom, shut the door, and years later, the Underground put a lyric in a song about it.